Nostalgia. Now, nostalgia is one of those emotions that's been around for so long, almost every single person on this earth has probably felt it in some way, shape, or form. I know that at the moment, nostalgia has been such a pivotal thing of so many people's lives, including mine, and a lot of that derives from just our kind of current life situations. So today, I've got some notes on my screen, I've got some brand new gameplay and a brand new concept for you guys, and we're going to be going through why we crave nostalgia. And I think, kind of starting off, let's talk about what nostalgia is. Nostalgia is basically a sentimental longing for the past. It's a very intense emotion, kind of like, think of extreme sadness and how you feel in an extreme sadness, kind of that level of emotion, except nostalgia is kind of like a blend of either pure longing for something, pure happiness, sometimes reminiscing or doing something from the past can give you some of the most happy, self-fulfilling nostalgia you ever get in your life. Like, a great example of this was a little bit ago. I remembered a childhood memory of mine when I was playing on the PlayStation 2, and I was thinking about a couple of the games. I think the one I was thinking of was the Rayman Legends race. I don't remember what the game was called, but it was all the Rayman characters doing some race and mini game, kind of like a Mario Party without the board level, one of those spin-off games. And I was just thinking about all those times I'd be going for those little blue jewel things in the different modes. Bro, I got a massive nostalgia hit from playing that. And although I didn't go replay it, I watched some videos on it, and then I kind of diverse myself into the field of PS2 again, looking at all the games and really realizing damn, I do not remember it looking like this, but I remember this so vividly, especially when I was looking at an old Ratchet and Clank game on the PS2 as well. That really gave me a massive wave of damn, I remember every part of this, but it just didn't look like this. And part of that type of nostalgia is what a lot of people feel. It's not really a missing the times that were simpler, but more appreciating and looking back on those fonder memories in a time where life wasn't too serious, or in a time where you weren't worried about too much in the world. And I feel like that's how a lot of us tend to look at nostalgia, kind of as a way to connect with the past. It maintains a kind of sense of continuity between both those past days and our current life. But then we kind of go into the negatives about nostalgia, and specifically how we use it to cope. A lot of people will boost self-esteem with nostalgic memories that make them feel better about themselves. Thinking about past things that make them feel good. Oh, I did this and did this and did this. And normally that'd be quite good. Except, the reliance on it can start to be negative when you start to go back a bit. And it's going to be very specific. It's a very gray line here, what I'm about to say. But, nostalgia in the sense of oh, I did this to this person, so I'm better than them, is an example of a negative motive using nostalgia. Whereas you think, oh, I've accomplished all this before, I know I can do it again. That's a little bit more of a positive, it's a self-analyzing and giving yourself your flowers, basically. There's also other ways where people will live for nostalgia, in a way nostalgia becomes kind of their drug, living in the past, trying so hard to be at the point in the past that they once were, because, they cherish those times or hold on to those times because that was the only thing they feel they had that was them. I think a great example of this is people who hold on to how they were in high school, specifically their popularity or the way they were treated or how on top of the world they felt, or any type of general thing from the past. Usually it's something to do with high school or childhood memories. People will hold on to it, nurture it, they'll try everything in their power to have it be that way. They'll act towards people the same way they did then, because to them that's their only way of feeling they're okay with their current present. And a lot of this is because people aren't happy with our present. Before we kind of go into the deep rooted hole of nostalgia and why all of us really kind of crave it now, I feel like the main, the surface level and the iceberg and all that jazz, a lot of it is going to be positive reminiscing, reliving your childhood to make new memories, which is basically just as good, which I think is the surface level and how we all look at it. But specifically, the negatives is what I want to kind of focus on here, because I like nostalgia for anybody who is dealing with it, whether in a negative or positive way, to appreciate it for what it is. And even kind of talking to myself here, appreciating the nostalgia as a positive time throughout my life that I'd hope to relive and make newer, just as good memories playing or whatever it may be, right? Not really looking at old days and regretting things that I've done or you might have done, or wishing we didn't do this or do that. And I think the best way I can tell you to get over it without going on a whole spiel about getting over stuff is that you shouldn't regret anything you've done. And not in the sense where you shouldn't regret that you've made a bad mistake, because someone's definitely going to be like, oh, you know, what if you did this terrible thing? Like, obviously, I don't mean in that way, but I mean every decision you ever make leads you to the point you are right now. And that's the ideology I like to live by. Call it string theory, if you will. You know, call it opening a new door until you enter a destination or whatever. I just kind of look at it as like, yeah, I made these mistakes. Yes, I regret them. Yes, I wish I didn't do it. But at the same time, I wouldn't have this perspective if I didn't do it. There's a version of me who never gave a fuck about those mistakes and just moved on and was just like, fuck them. And then there's the me who looks back and is like, damn, you know, I shouldn't have done that. That was shitty of me, and I wish there was a way I could do something about it. But obviously, the opportunity and window's missed. So for me, all I know I can do is just learn from it and be a better person, and hope, you know, one day that will correct itself in whatever form. And I choose to live that way, not in the sense of ignorance, but just because it makes me realize that yes, I've made mistakes and I've done good and bad, and that's okay, because that gets me to a different place. Being able to understand that, digest that, and move forward is my way of, you know, not using nostalgia to bring myself down. It's a way of accepting the past for what it is and moving forward. Because a lot of people, including myself, struggle to deal with things from the past. You know, it's hard to face points in life that were uncomfortable, you know, unfamiliar, and then rotate into new environments. You know, one of the worst things, it's really the only reason sometimes I get pulled back in the past, is when I'd meet someone I haven't seen in a long time, or someone who was friends with someone from my past or from their past or whatever, and then they say something like, oh yeah, you did this amount of time, and you know, they hold it against you. You know, they act like you're the same person you were then, and that could be one of the most toughest things to get over, because it's almost like knocking down this massive fort that you've built with a single blow, you know? I mean, obviously, you shouldn't have a fort that could be coming down so easy, but I guess you kind of get the sentiment of what I'm saying. Anyway, funny enough, I decided for this video that it would fit the theme of nostalgia if we put a beautiful nostalgic game on the screen. Because I feel like a lot of people look at nostalgia at base value, something like childhood memories. For me, I was lucky to grow up in the generation, you know, that was coming up with gaming when the internet was first forming. I wasn't really like an internet-bound kid until kind of my earlier teens, you know, like the 13, 14, 15 days, discovering all the YouTubers coming out, and then you're doing all this and doing that, and like just kind of witnessing the societal shift that happened through the internet and social media. Although I didn't join social media till a lot later in life, just really kind of seeing it all unfold, but still, you know, being part of the outdoor life and having that childhood experience and both the outside activities and the inside. For me, like a lot of the nostalgic things I really resonate with, and so does a lot of other Gen Z people. You know, it's very easy to look back at such fond memories because we have so many different fond memories to look back at. You know, you look at the kids now and then the new generations, and then you can kind of see like, what are they gonna have to look back on? You know, brain rot, skibbity toilet, iPad. Like, you know, they didn't have a combination of multiple things, and although it's not every kid, I know it's a lot of them. So with this in mind, one of the big ones for people is Pokemon. And for me, of course, I've always loved Pokemon since I was young. And I feel like looking back at stuff like this and those PS2 games I talked about earlier, or even reliving those childhood experiences, you know, whatever it may have been, you get that intense longing for a period of time that, you know, just felt easier. And maybe because it was easier, or maybe because, you know, you weren't thinking about things as much as you are now. You know, you weren't waking up having to go to work and deal with this. You know, you weren't waking up going to school and hating it, or doing a job you don't like, or whatever your situation may be. And one of the big kickers, and I guess kind of the two main points of this video, or the two remaining points I want to go into, is one, the way the world is now, specifically with how just fucking accessible everything is, and two, the current situation you're in. Because I feel like your situation is always going to be how you're going to look at your life. You know, if you're in an unhappy situation, you know, you wake up, you see people around you doing well, you see friends doing well, or people you don't like doing well, it can be very easy to feel like you're behind people. Kind of in the same sentiment of the tortoise and the hare story, except you just got to be fortified and be an absolute aura farmer like the little tortoise here, and just slow and steady wins the race it, because, you know, the hare might sprint, but, you know, it might not win, you know. But with that sentiment in mind, like, it's very easy to just get caught up in your own head and doubting yourself for whatever the reason. You know, I do it so much, and that's how I'll find myself, you know, reminiscing on things, always living out of the now, you know, not being present, which is the most important thing you can do. Because the direct contradiction to nostalgia would be being present. Maybe not in the sense of they're total opposites, but it's basically like you can either live in this moment and appreciate it for what it is, or you can live in the past and forever chase it, which is, you know, not good. But I mean, look, the main thing I want to discuss with that out the way is going to be the way society is now, because unfortunately, as much as I would like to say, you know, we're so much more advanced now and all this and all that, a lot of the reason why those days felt so nostalgic and easy, besides being, you know, a young child or a young adolescent, a lot of it was just the lack of comparison, you know, the lack of distraction. And not distraction like there wasn't something to do, but there wasn't a be bored moment, because your boredom wasn't the same as it is now. Your boredom now is, oh, I have to wait on this. You know, I'm in a mundane situation right now. I need to scroll. I need to play Clash Royale. I need to do this. I need to do that. Or, you know, if I'm sitting at home and I have nothing to do, oh, I need a game. I need to watch a video. I need to watch this. I mean, you know, like, you're always like running and doing this and doing that. But when you were a kid, you know, especially on the days where you maybe weren't allowed to play on games, you had to go inside and think. Or, you know, you had to find something to do inside. You had to think with your brain and just do something. And obviously, adult responsibilities always play a big part into people's time and the way they look at life. But, you know, not having that kind of time to yourself to just not distract yourself always, just find a way to be present in some form, you know, creatively, or doing something you like, even watching a movie, doing anything. Like, it doesn't matter how you choose to enjoy your kind of free time, but what matters is appreciating the free time and enjoying it because it's your free time. You know, you're not watching the movie because you have nothing else to do. You're watching the movie because you really want to watch the movie. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a perspective switch on it. And, you know, that kind of like takes the concept that you're looking for in nostalgia and using it to your advantage right now. You know, it's not a moment from the past, it's a moment now, and I appreciate it now. Like, even a stupid example, which is just such a great one. Think about making like an absolute bomb meal, like the most amazing meal you ever made in your life, with something that you didn't plan, but ended up just being the most tasty shit you've ever had. Or, you know, maybe you go out and you know, you didn't have a set plan, but something happened and it was just the most fulfilling experience you ever had. And that happened today. Not 2 years ago, not 10 years ago, not in your childhood, not in the best time in your life. It happened right now, in the life that we all try to escape. And, you know, with that in mind, obviously, everything's just very accessible these days. You know, everything from people's profiles, people around the world, every movie, anime, TV show, you know, information is at the a one click away, you know, one scroll away, as they say. You know, basically everything and everything could be accessed from home, from the comfort of your phone or computer. You know, you can make money at home in your phone, on your computer. You know, you can call people. You don't have to go anymore. You don't have to send letters. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. So I can see why people are living in the past. You know, they're living in a time when it's more simple. And you'd think it'd be simpler now, having access to all of these things. But it just kind of reinforces our laziness, you know. And, you know, it gives us more of a reason not to do these things, because we could just get everything we want without actually having to do anything. You know, which defeats the whole point of going and doing something in the first place, which the whole point was that you'd go out, for example, to go watch the movies, or you'd go out to the park to play with friends, or you'd have to go to your friend's house to actually contact them, or you'd have to call them on the ring phone, or what's it called? I forgot what the name of the ring phone was. Rolodex, I think it is. The Rolodex phone. Yeah. No, is that the Rolodex? I don't know. But like there was ways that you had to put somewhat of an effort to get something done, especially like when you were bored when you were younger. You know, you had to find a way to entertain yourself without your screens, without your infinite movies, without this or without that. And I think that's just the most important thing to take away from this, because at the end of the day, nostalgia is good. And you shouldn't deny nostalgia and reject nostalgia, because it's a beautiful thing, and I think it's one of the only positive emotions in the world where I genuinely don't think there's nearly as much negatives as there is positives. But at the same time, it's also one of those things which could be extremely exploited based on your situation. There's so much negatives that can come from it, despite there being such little negatives. And I mean, look, basically, we're to summarize why we chase nostalgia. A lot of it is just, we want comfort. We want to feel familiar. And, looking back in the past, the happier times makes you feel more comfortable with yourself. And sometimes when you're having a really bad day, it's easier to just go back into the past and think about times that were easier, reclaiming them positive emotions, as my notes would say. And sometimes we just need connection. Sometimes we feel like we want to look back at a time where we were more connected with people around us, whatever that may be. Maybe you had a lot of friends when you were younger. Maybe you used to hang out with that one guy or girl or family or whoever. So sometimes looking back, nostalgia can be that. Even in a relationship sense, you look back to your first love or your first girl or guy or whatever, or even first pet. You just look for something because you're unhappy with where you are now. And for those times where you get that random nostalgia hit in the middle of whatever the ability or task or whatever happens, embrace it and appreciate it for what it is. But anyway, that's it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.